The Muse, a wellspring of creativity, irresistible, intangible, uncontrollable, erratic, the epitome of creativity. Welcome to the Goddess Keys, where we merge fact and fiction and play with the concept of identity and creating our own avatar outside of the false matrix simulation. To do this, we explore the realms of art and the way that it's been suppressed and the way that we can unlock the latent keys that lie within us to create a living masterpiece, which is our life's trajectory. And today we are going to discuss the Muse archetype. The Muse archetype can be found in Greek philosophy. There were 9 muses, and each one of these muses represented one aspect of art or creativity. Everything from poetry to music, even to the sciences. And you have these famous Greek philosophers such as Herodotus and Plato and Epicurus, who referred to the muses in their work and basically described the muses as being, first of all, they were feminine energies. That's one thing to note, is that the muse archetype does typically run more feminine. It's the masculine counterpart, or a masculine receiver receives the gifts bestowed by the muse. And we'll talk about how this has been utilized in our culture and what some of the challenges are if you do exhibit the muse archetype. And of course, we'll utilize different media examples and different mythological examples to kind of hone this point in. These male Greek philosophers discuss this concept of going to this feminine wellspring of creativity in order to have inspiration bestowed upon them for them to create their great bodies of work. How do you know if you are having the muse archetype within your realm? If you're somebody who is just naturally creative, who naturally knows how to beautify things around you, you are possessing the archetype of the muse. You're somebody who people just naturally feel better around. A lot of people who possess the muse archetype, they do tend to be more in their feminine energy. A lot of times they're caretakers, artists, creatives, naturally musical, naturally good with plants, naturally good with children. And people just feel better when they're around you. But here are some of the issues as it relates to the muse archetype. The muse has been a lot of times been utilized as something to take from. If you look at the way art and music particularly are viewed within our culture, it's very much gate-kept. That's why you've seen all these scandals, specifically within the music industry and the celebrity culture. Even though art creates everything that we see, taste, touch, and feel, the controllers of the simulation a lot of times like to keep gates around who's able to create and who's not able to create. And this is why a lot of times people who are creators, who do make a living a lot of times off of being creative, they sometimes might need to initiate, or they might need to get a sponsor, that sort of stuff. So there's always like these strings attached to it. But one thing that we're doing, and the reason why we're exploring these archetypes, is because all of that stuff is really old paradigm, and we're moving into a new energy where we claim our art and creativity as a right to exist and as a right to thrive. And it really is the people who are able to blossom into their creative energy and potential who are going to thrive in the times to come. This is the time for the creatives. So if you've been one of those closeted creators, one of those people who have been too afraid to create because you don't feel like it will provide you with the sustenance that you need to sustain yourself, then you would really want to tap into this energy of the muse archetype, seeing where you possess the energy of the muse and where that might have been exploited. And we'll discuss this with some media references in a minute. Actually, let's just jump right into it. So the first media reference related to the muse that I'd like to discuss is a pretty obvious one. Literally, the movie is called The Muse, and it was created in 1999, starring Sharon Stone. And I believe the guy's name was Albert Brooks. In this Albert Brooks film, The Muse, Brooks is a screenwriter who's really frustrated. He hasn't gotten the creative juices flowing. He has writer's block, and he hears about this muse that a lot of folks in Hollywood utilize, and that character is Sharon Stone. And something about Sharon Stone, if you know about her, if you followed her body of work, she's definitely been somebody who's been more within her dark feminine. She's gotten some of her starring roles have been her leaning into that dark feminine archetype. And the Muse is actually no exception, because in this particular movie, she is the Muse, and basically people hire her, pamper her, put her up in luxury settings, because wherever she goes, creativity flows. So they even make a joke, it's a satire film, and in the film it shows how all of these like different Hollywood creators have utilized Sharon Stone's services as Muse in order to make hit blockbuster films. But it's kind of funny because Albert Brooks kind of needs to walk on eggshells around Sharon Stone's character during the movie to make sure she stays happy in order for her to bestow her creativity upon him. And it actually does work. She actually does inspire creativity within him and even the life of his wife during the course of the movie. Now, some critics might say that Sharon Stone's character is very exploitative of Albert Brooks or some of these Hollywood big shots. But maybe Sharon Stone was just really owning her dark feminine energy, knowing the value she brought to these creators' lives and making sure that she was well compensated for it. Sharon Stone knew her worth, and she made sure that her work was valued and that her presence was valued. And this is something, if you do possess this Muse archetype, are you growing where you're causing things to grow? So if it's a symbiotic relationship of growth where you're pouring into someone or you're pouring into a project and then they're growing you in return, that's great. But if you get into this dynamic, which a lot of muses do, a lot of muses might sometimes get into a dynamic where their energy sometimes gets exploited. Sometimes their talents get exploited. Sometimes they get brought into different settings in order for their talents to water others to the point of depletion. So this is the shadow side of the Muse, and Sharon Stone's character in the Muse kind of turns that on its head and makes sure that she kind of becomes a little predatory in her dark feminine as it relates to her gifts of being a Muse. But she does it so that she can maintain her own livelihood while sharing her gift within this very kind of more male dominated Hollywood scene. Okay, so that's one aspect of the Muse. I think another thing to explore when we think about the Muse is Muse as wife. Because the Muse tends to hold more of a feminine energy, and the receivers of the gifts and talents of the Muse has traditionally been more of the masculine. It's been more of the masculine going to the Muse for inspiration, and the Muse bestowing inspiration on the masculine and growing the masculine. This also might be where that saying comes from, where they say like behind every strong man is a strong woman or something like that. That also might be from this concept of the Muse. The feminine represents an endless well of creativity, and this is inspired from the womb space. Even if you are somebody who studies chakras and you study the sacral chakra, which is connected to the womb space, the sacral chakra tends to be the chakra of creativity, and there's a reason why it's connected to the womb. So inherently the Muse needs to kind of be more within their feminine, but to get out of the distortion of the Muse, you also want to make sure you lean into the masculine energy of ensuring that you are always compensated for your gifts and for your talents. And it's not something where you ask, you expect it, you demand it. You create a structure of your world where you are being fed as you feed others. So this is the Muse being in a more balanced state, and that would be a balanced masculine and feminine. Now let's think about Muse as wife. So one example that came to my head right away when I thought about this was the relationship of Miles Davis and Bette Davis. And not Bette Davis, the old-timey actress from the 1930s and 40s and 50s. Love that Bette Davis. But I'm not talking about that Betty Davis today. I am talking about Betty Davis, who is known as being the Queen of Funk, way before her time. In the time when she came out in the 1970s, even though she presented as being a woman of color, she had organizations like the NAACP boycotting her and basically saying that her message was too raunchy, was too wild, and she was just too much. She was somebody who would like literally go on stage and people would like crash into things because they were so stunned by all of the fabulosity that she was giving. She was not afraid to live out loud. She was not afraid to be unabashedly herself. She actually always had a love for music, but she got her start in the entertainment industry as a model and was known for dating a lot of musicians during the time that she was up and coming. She got a lot of backlash for the messaging that she put out in her music, but it was very much about a woman in her power, knowing that she's powerful, knowing that she's sexy, knowing that she has everything that she needs, and not asking for permission to be exactly who she authentically was. Now, during this time, she did end up marrying Miles Davis. Miles Davis was a famous jazz musician. He was very famous like more in the 1950s and 60s, or this blue note jazz, but he was kind of more in the suits. He did a lot of the suits. He came from the old school jazz era. And when Betty Davis met Miles, like one of the first things that she did once they got together was like literally threw away his whole wardrobe, got him more into the psychedelic things. There was a 19-year age gap with them. Introduced him to people like Jimi Hendrix and Sly and the Family Stone, was his muse. Okay, gave him a new identity outside of the old school suit sort of jazz. Freshened up his style. Even one of his albums, she was on the cover of one of his albums. She helped him name different albums. She kind of helped him to reimagine his relationship to music. He also had some heavy drug addiction issues that she supported him with getting through and embracing a more healthier lifestyle. She was his muse. But the same thing that Miles Davis fell in love with Betty Davis for was what made him actually leave her, because at the end of the day, he said she was too much. She was too free. She wasn't really like that wife material. Kind of actually spread a lot of lies about her, even said that she slept with Jimi Hendrix, even though she denied those allegations. And interestingly enough, after he divorced Betty Davis, Miles Davis actually went to start working with Jimi Hendrix shortly before Jimi Hendrix passed away. So kind of interesting, because it's like, if you did think somebody was sleeping with your wife, why would you blame your wife but then collaborate with that person? So it's just kind of an interesting twist on it. Betty Davis also went on to date Eric Clapton, and interestingly enough, she refused to collaborate for some reason with Eric Clapton, and I kind of think that's interesting that she did, because you would think that she might utilize that opportunity to get into the limelight, but there was something that made her not really want to collaborate with Eric Clapton. So I'm curious to learn more about what that was about. But the thing about it is that Betty Davis never really got up and running. So even though she was this huge inspiration to Miles Davis, her ex-husband, and also other musicians as well, she knew a lot of musicians and a lot of civil rights activists. She had a friendship with Huey P. Newton, and she influenced a lot of musicians, but she never really got her shine or her flowers, and ended up becoming a recluse. She stopped answering the phone for anybody. She changed all her numbers, even the cousins that she was working with musically. She completely ghosted the music industry and went into hiding. And they did a documentary on her in the early 2000s, and they found her in this like basement apartment, no phone, no internet, no car, very much to herself. And a lot of people said she had a mental breakdown. They said that she was really paranoid and that she thought people were out to get her. In the documentary, she's actually talking to crows, which I found kind of interesting. So, very much of like a dark feminine energy there. I'm thinking like it was kind of like a weird destiny swap situation. She probably saw an aspect of the industry that broke her in a certain way, and maybe she was just a little bit too free within that time in order to make it. Maybe there was the stakes got a little bit too high for her, and she decided that being a recluse was the best option. She actually ended up passing away in 2022. Here's an example of a woman who very much embodied the muse, embodied art itself, and grew people's career through it, but in a certain way was destroyed by it as well. And this is why we want to be so tender and so protective over our artistry, because it's more than just singing a song. It's more than just creating a painting. When you are tapped into your art, you are creating your own narrative. And, you know, back in those days, unfortunately, you needed a record deal to be heard and to be seen. Betty Davis is an example of a muse who was exploited for her talents and the cost of that exploitation. If you are looking to go into the arts, you definitely want to really sit with your connection with the muse archetype. You might have certain vows, oaths, and agreements in your subconscious that would say that you're not allowed to be musical, or you're not allowed to be creative, or you might have energies within your life where you're giving all of your creative energy elsewhere outside of your own creations. And you'll start noticing as you lean more into your creativity, notice how your environment around you responds. Are there aspects in your environment that kind of are more adversarial towards you because you want to express yourself creatively? This might be an example of a fallen muse archetype that you would want to alchemize so that you're able to remain within your power as you express yourself artistically, because you are your greatest masterpiece and ultimately you are your greatest muse. And if you find yourself giving away your special sauce to everyone outside of yourself and you don't feel like you're being fed or fertilized, then something's inverted, and it's time to reclaim the muse by balancing the masculine and the feminine. So if you are interested in expressing yourself in a deeper way creatively and finding ways to channel your creativity into your career, into a larger passion that you have, then consider going on an uncoached quest with me. I do have something that's known as the Autumn Passageway, which until October 1st, if you book a quest with me, it will be done at a reduced rate. I have quests which are 1 month, 3 months, and 12 months. I'll still be offering these after October 1st, but I'll go back to the regular pricing. So if that's something that you're interested in, don't delay and contact me with the contact details below. And then I also want to highlight my Beyond the Birth Chart reading that I am offering. I'll put a link of that below as well. This is for if you are looking to do an archetype or avatar shift. If you feel as though you've been locked into a certain identity within the simulation and you're looking to expand, what we do is we look at your birth chart not as a way of following the birth chart, but seeing where different bindings or different contracts or different blockages show up within your chart, which might prevent you from making the shift that you're seeking. And we do the alchemy through seeing what grids these are attached to, seeing the architecture, the false matrix architecture that might be attached to the way you're experiencing your world. And we work to deconstruct that through alchemizing your birth chart. So if that's something that you're interested in, then check out my Beyond the Birth Chart reading. Sending you lots of love, joy, and peace. Until we meet again.